Good morning, everybody, and thank you for attending today's monthly technical webinar series for April of 2013. Today's webinar is creating a progress analysis graphic with two P6 schedules, and it is being presented by Don McNatty from Dr. McNatty and Associates. We have a couple of housekeeping items that we would like to go over first before we get started. We still have a couple of people that are in queue that are getting signed in. First, all calls will be muted today so we can preserve the quality of the audio for all attendees and also for the recording of today's webinar. If anybody during the duration of today's webinar has any questions, there is a box in your GoToWebinar where you can submit your questions, and at the end of today's webinar, we will try and answer as many as possible. If we do run short of time and are unable to answer all of them for you, we will be sending a follow-up email out to all attendees and registrations. In this follow-up email, you receive a recording of today's webinar. You will also receive a copy of the slideshow presentation, and we will also include an Excel file that will list all the questions that were asked along with the responses from today's presenter. So we're going to get started, and we're going to turn everything over to Don McNatty for today's webinar presentation.
Morning. Just a little bit about Dr. McNatty and Associates and what we provide. Some of you have seen this before. We're an Oracle Platinum partner. We've been focused on Primavera for the last 25 plus years, providing software, support services, and hosting. So every month we do these technical webinars to try and pass on to people things that, on how we do things, how we use the tools and things as they're coming along. Next month the webinar will be on the newly released P6 Pro 8.3, which, by the way, I'll be using today. You really won't see much of a difference on the screen, but 8.3 has been released. Our latest newsletter has a tech tip on how you can upgrade your existing 6.2 and up to version 8.3. So if you didn't get the newsletter, just let us know and we'll make sure you get a copy of it. What I'm going to cover today is just to show some techniques that I use in P6 to create progress analysis graphics to support schedule reviews that we provide to clients. Okay, I'll show the use of the P6 professional layout, codes and filters, the steps that I use to create the graphic using P6 and other tools. Actually going to go through a demonstration going into P6 and show you how I actually do it, talk about some of the other options available in P6 and why you may or may not want to use those. Okay? So what is the schedule review report? Well, it's a document that would be produced monthly by someone that's reviewing a schedule update. Usually it'll have an executive summary. It may have a page or two of key metric comparisons, identify some issues and impacts, spelling them out. And we usually will have one or more what I call progress analysis graphics, where we'll take issues that we've identified in the schedule and put them into a graphic format to make it a little bit easier for the client to understand. So, the basis of this diagram is a P6 Pro layout that has been annotated to bring attention to certain parts of it. I actually have two projects open at the same time. So I have a previous update and the current update, so I can compare a limited amount of the critical path, see what was planned for the period, and then what was actually accomplished. And then we usually will paste this graphic into the report itself. So the characteristics of an analysis graphic, basically it's used to communicate technical information to a non-technical audience. It includes information from at least 2 monthly updates. I've done 3. I don't think I would do more than that. You need to keep this simple to Don't try to communicate too much in one document. If what you're trying to communicate is complex, then you might do it through a series of one-page graphics that lead up to or back up a summary document. Try to use clear language, avoid acronyms such as CPM, actually printing out or using the whole word, critical path. I paste the graphics into the report, but it could also be referenced as an attachment. There's a number of ways that you could do it. And most of the annotation of the graphic is done outside of P6, where I have tools that give me a wider choice of colors and text and shapes and things that I can use to provide some emphasis to the graphic. And I try to use common desktop tools that all of us use, and that's what I'll be showing you today. So it starts out with a P6 professional layout. So this is the P6 client, not P6 web, that I'm using, P6 professional. The layout has certain properties. It can be shared, so you may have a template that is a global template shared by everyone, and then as people customize them, they may save versions as project-specific or user-specific. A layout will use codes and filters to organize groups, select and sort. I'm going to have columns on the left, the bar chart, to produce an entire graphic. I do like layouts because it gives me access to all of the properties of an activity, so there's really nothing that I can't get access to, including being able to show notes and things like that on my screen, because I'm printing this. I'm actually taking a screenshot, and that's how I'm producing my graphic. It can be printed, but I usually make a graphic out of it. My enhancements within the P6 layout are pretty limited to just curtains and text, so there's not a lot that I do there, but the foundation of it is the P6 schedule data. It's not free form. If I have to dig in for more detail to back up a graphic, it's all readily available to me within the P6 database. So here's a typical P6 Pro layout. I can turn on and off relationships, control my sorting, my grouping, my summarization, my subtotals. When activities are selected, I've got spotlight, because the spotlight's on, and it's also highlighting certain activities. You can do my sight lines, my data date, progress date, histograms, curves. So this is really the essence of working with schedules in P6. This is really where the professional scheduler really does all their work. And rather than fighting to try and get it to print out exactly the way I have it on the screen, I usually just use the screen so that there's no problems getting exactly what I want. Now, P6 codes and filters, there's a great deal of built-in functionality for all my sorting, filtering, grouping. The problem is that if I'm opening up 2 months, what was critical in 1 month may not be critical in the following month. So using a critical filter might not give me all the activities that I need for the second project. Also, the critical path may have, there may be multiple critical paths, parallel critical paths, a lot of redundant activities that just cause confusion. And what I like to do is get these narrowed down to the essence of what I'm talking about and get it on one page to make it easier for the person looking at it and trying to understand it to really be able to absorb what I'm trying to say. Sorting by codes, we've all done that for a long time, but that can sometimes be cumbersome to make changes, so I use a little bit different approach. And as I said before, we may need to mix critical and non-critical activities in the same layout, so that requires a different approach, primarily using the user-defined fields or custom fields select, sorting, grouping, and annotating capabilities. So here's an example of a customized layout. I've got two projects open. You can see on the update, the second month, I've got progress, and my progress did not happen the way it was planned. So if I use a critical filter, I wouldn't get some of these activities. And if I use, let's say, a start sort, these activities would be rearranged because some of them started out of sequence. And what I'm trying to do here is I have a list of activities here. I have the exact same list sorted the exact same way down here. That makes it easier for someone viewing this to be able to go from one to the other. Now, some things I've done here is I'm grouping by a custom field where I have a shortened title. A lot of times the project names might be a little bit too long or may not exactly fit what I want, the look that I want for this particular graphic that I'm producing. So I've got a freeform capability using the custom field for that. My filter is selecting specific activities, not necessarily whether they're critical. I may start there, but I can also add to it by using the custom field for my filter. You'll notice that when I have the spotlight here, my activities aren't highlighted. I actually think the spotlight, when it highlights the activities, is a little bit of a distraction. But what I'm trying to show, which is this is the work period that's being recorded. These are the activities in the critical path that were supposed to be worked on. This is what actually happened. And then I can add other notes to better explain what's going on here. So, again, down here in the lower, I've got my activity sorted the exact same way because I've used a user-defined field for my sort. The steps to create the graphics are, I create my layout, setting up my columns, activities, and organizing them, add my curtain indicators and get it positioned just the way I want it. And then I use Snagit to capture the graphic, take that graphic into PowerPoint, where I annotate as needed to give me some clear explanations for the viewer. And then I capture it again as a graphic, and I do that so that I can rotate it from a landscape to a portrait orientation before I paste it into a Word document. Many of you on the call, I've seen the list of people that are logged in. Many of you do this every day. Maybe there's something new you haven't seen. I'm sure that many of you could share some other tips on things that you do to do much the same thing. So here's an example of the annotated graphic after it comes out of PowerPoint, where I put in some notes here. So someone looking at this can clearly see this is planned, this is actual, it's my current slippage. Then I can explain what's going on here, to change my float from a -15 to a -36. I wanted to use a real project on this just for giggles, I guess, but these are all things that many of us have seen in projects. And so what I'm going to do when I go live into the software is just show you the steps that I use to do this. So the other tools that I mentioned that I used is Snagit, capture screen images, must be rotate to portrait for pasting it into Word, among other things. I use Microsoft PowerPoint. I'll talk about some of the other tools that are available that you could use for the same thing. Then we use Microsoft Word to create the report document that once it's finalized, we print it into an Adobe PDF to deliver it to our client. So other tools such as Visio and Illustrator or Captivate, Snapdraw, and others may work just as well. So I'm going to go through a demonstration right now. I'll switch over to P6 Pro and go through the steps Dan, does that come up okay for you? It's not too large?
No, it's fine, Don.
Okay. I work from a 24-inch monitor, which is also a necessity if you're going to be doing graphics like this, because you need to get an awful lot of information on the screen to be able to take a picture. Now, one of the things that I do in managing these schedules is every client has their own database. So these are the only projects within this database. This makes it easier to comply with legal requirements when the project's done and somebody wants a copy of the database. And so I don't have my client files intermixed. In order to do that, you need to be using the Microsoft SQL database. That allows you to have multiple databases on a local install of P6 Pro, or even on a hosted install. We commonly have P6 users that have multiple databases. If you want to know how to do that yourself, you can go to our website and go to Resources, Tech Tips, and right down here there's a tech tip for installing SQL 2008 Express. And so that will help you to configure multiple databases within a P6 installation. Okay. So I've got all of my projects right here. You'll notice that I've got the one that I'm working on, I have a copy of the project. The other reason I like P6 Pro is because I can pull an XCR file in without having to recalculate it. To me, when I'm reviewing a schedule, recalculating is the same as destroying the evidence. So if I import a schedule from P3 or Microsoft Project, I know that there's changes made in the schedule, and I have an issue with that. And pulling in an XCR file, I can prevent it from being recalculated. But what I do is I make a copy of it, and then I'll calculate the copy so that I can see if there's any variance in my dates, and also if the person submitting the schedule has not provided me with the log report, I like to have the log report because there's information in there that I like to see when I'm reviewing the schedule. Now, the foundation of this is my user-defined field. So whether you're running P6 Pro linked to an EPPM database or you're running just P6 Pro, you have access to create these user-defined fields on the enterprise menu. So it's very simple. This is my filter, my group, and my sort. Sometimes I might want more than one, so I might have a filter 2 or a group 2. And I also create an indicator, because sometimes, especially if someone's been deleting or adding new activities, I like to put a column in the layout and put a, the yellow yield sign or a little red bubble to grab someone's attention that they know that there's some changes being made to the schedule. So I'm going to open up this 11 update project. And I have a layout set up for progress analysis. And you can see I've got a list of activities here. They're sorted. And if I open this up, you can see my columns for my custom field. So I have a filter. I have a group by. That's where this is coming from. And then I have a very specific sorting. Now, for this particular one, I could sort by the start date and get the very same sequence. But when I open up the second project, you'll find that I really need to override that sort to get the activities positioned the way that I want. Now, why do I have to filter? Well, let's go here, and I'm going to change this to a critical filter. And I'm going to apply it. And now look at all of the activities that I get when I have the critical filter. So how confusing would this be to give to a client? The other thing that I do usually with these graphics is I only go a few months out. And and not necessarily deal with the whole end date of the project, although I can just show a few months and then select just the last few activities, leaving the gap where we all know a miracle happens. But so far I've resisted putting that graphic in any customer reports. But there's things here, I've got multiple paths. These are the exact same activities, but they're on different floors. They all come together to the same point. And here I have concurrent work. There's really no need to show this unless we get into progress and different activities get delayed and become critical. So in this particular case, though, because I'm going to start a comparison of my update 11 or my update 12 to update 11, I do want to extend it out a little bit. So I'm going to go down here, coming on the ceiling tile. I'm going to take these two activities here and that milestone, and I put the one on there so that they'll show up in the next filter. And it's really easy to code them just by dragging them into this group. And now it's been automatically coded. And then I'll add my sorting on here. Then I'll go back to setting up my filter. So now I've just expanded this to add some more activities onto the end of this. There's enough room here to communicate a little bit more information to the customers. The other thing that I want to do next before I set up my next month is I need to select these activities for the next month, and they may not be critical. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a snag and capture of these activities. So now I have that in Snagit. I'm going to go back to my project screen, and I'm going to open up my project 12 update. You'll notice that nothing has been coded for the number 1. So I actually have another layout out here that I use. That has all the activities in it, and they're sorted by activity ID. And so now what I'm going to do is I've got my list of activities. I'm going to open up so I can see my filter 1. And then I'm going to bring Snagit over right next to it so I can see my list of activities. Now, when my activities are sorted, I know the E's are going to follow the numbers. So I'm going to use the Control-F key to find that first activity, 12190, and then I'll go down through the list. Let me move this out of the way. This is about the fastest way that I've seen to be able to manually select activities that I'm going to want to use in this layout. Go down to 310, 330, and now I got to come back, make sure that I'm back on the activity column. We'll find those last activities that I just added in. So I'll jump down to them, and I'll tag them, and that's essentially what I'm doing here, is tagging. And now I'm going to find the ones that have the E's in front of them. And so there's my E-1140. People aren't always consistent with how they use these tools. So I got 1120 and 1200. I'll cancel that. I'm done with my snagging for right now. I'll open this up, and I'm going to go back to my layout number 1, and now I have my activities selected. I'll use a start, but you can see that because of some out-of-sequence progress, they're not necessarily in the same way, and I selected an activity there that I actually don't need. And there's an easy way of finding the correct activity. I want the successor to the HVAC commissioning. So I'm going to turn on my relationships, and there's that milestone that I missed. So I'll grab that and tag it, shut off my bottom window, apply my filter, and so now I'm ready there. The other thing I may want to do is to move my data date forward. We'll adjust that once we get both projects open, which I'm going to do right now, is I'll go in and I'll open up 11 and 12 at the same time. So I can see my sorting. So the 11120, that's going to be my number 1. 1200 is 2. This is going to be 3, 4. And if I use the sort, now I'm getting them positioned. Let's go back to where we were here. 12. So I got 12,200 was 5. Now, yes, I could take this out to Excel and automatically number it, but by the time I get it out, I'm done with my quick fingers here. So now if I do my sort, now my activities are in the same exact order. I can adjust. I can see my old data date from when I opened up 12. And I know that this data date went through the end of December. So I use the sight line to line it up as well as the end of my progress right there. The other thing I want to do is I'm going to create my title here. So I'm going to say 12 update, and this one's going to be 01 January 13 is the date. And as soon as I do that, it groups. And again, I'll use my drag and drop to recode them. And so now I have my 2 groups. Okay? So I've got my sort values. The other thing that I have here on this layout right here, I can see that 12,200 does not show what its critical predecessor is that's driving it from January 1 on. So again, I'm going to go back and I'm going to turn on my lower detail for my predecessors, and I'm on my 12,200 activity, and then I can just use the go-to button to select the critical predecessors to it. And then I'll code it up. Now, you may have experienced situations like when you code something, suddenly everything starts moving around on you in your layout. Well, you can control that from 8.2 forward on the Tools menu. I can disable auto reorganization. Okay, so I have the auto reorganization turned off. and that prevents my layout from reorganizing itself all at once. And I'm going to put in these activities that are actually driving the critical path. I actually want to keep them down where they are once I bring them into the group. So again, I'm using the user-defined field to position these activities correctly. Okay? So I've got my grouping on. The next thing I'm going to do is I need to capture the whole graphic. This is where having a large screen comes in handy, because on a smaller monitor I wouldn't be able to see everything that's going on. The other issue that you have when you're going to use a screen capture is something here is going to be highlighted, and it's going to look a little bit out of sync. So one of the things I do before I'm ready to make this is I just hit the insert key to add another activity temporarily on the bottom. And now when I do my snag it, I miss that activity. I usually try to go out to the end of a monthly period. And so now I've taken a snapshot, put it back on that activity, and delete it. So I don't need it in there anymore. And so now I'm going to minimize my P6, and I'll go over to snag it. And so there's the graphic that I put in the snag it, and all I do here is a copy all, and then I open up PowerPoint, copy it in, size it, usually give it a little bit of a margin, a little bit of space. Then I start adding my annotations, and once I've added my annotations, this is what I've got. Okay, and usually I'll carry these forward from month to month, so the top one will be a blank, and it'll always be the current update, but I've got all the ones that I created are below it, and it makes it real easy to take and copy. I can go in and copy all of these annotations right onto this, move it around, put in my new notes, and I'm all done. Okay? Now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go snag it again, take my picture. Now I'm back in snag it. I go image, rotate left 90 degrees, go to draw, copy all, and now if I go into my Word document, I paste it into my Word document right where I've left a space for it to be. So that's the process. That was our demonstration of making it happen. So what are some other options? Well, there's an activity screen in P6 Web or P6 EPPM, which, at first thought you could use that. Well, a couple of problems with using the web activity screen. EPPM only supports an XML import, so you've got to get your files in an XML format. And it also requires you to recalculate a schedule when you pull it in. Well, I don't want to recalculate a schedule that I'm reviewing, and I told you why. So to me, it's just not an option on a review. Now, I could import SCRs to an EPPM database using P6 Pro without having to recalculate, and I could use the web activity screen. However, I still don't have as fine a control over sizing and things things like that that I have with the Windows-based P6 Pro. With P6 8.3, there's a new tool included called 8.3 Visualizer. So Visualizer replaces the timescale logic graphic tool that is in 8.2 with a tool that supports the same timescale logic diagrams as 8.2 had, plus it does Gantt charts. The issue there, though, is that Visualizer will only support 4 columns. In the filter selection, it does not use P6's layouts or filters, and the filter selection is much more limited. So even with these tools available in the Primavera environment, I still would stick with P6 Pro. As a professional scheduler, that is the tool that I would use to do schedule reviews. So, in summary, this webinar is described a technique that wouldn't be taught in any normal class. It's just one scheduler communicating to other schedulers some things that I do or we do as a group here, and it's our perspective on using these tools to communicate more clearly when we write our reports. I'm using 6 user-defined fields, which a little bit different than how you might normally do a layout, which gives me direct manual control over my filtering, sorting, and grouping. I'm using the best available tools in a simple and straightforward way. Snag, it's real simple for doing screen captures and printing too. PowerPoint, almost everybody has Microsoft Windows, so I find PowerPoint easy to use for this kind of a graphic. There certainly are other tools that you could use. So I hope you found this useful. For some of you, I know this probably bored you to death because you've been doing something like this for years, but we try to pass on information to all levels of our audience. There's a couple events coming up. The end of June is the AACE conference in Washington, D.C. By the way, one of the new additions to our website is a direct link to the recommended practice guides that AACE provides for our project controls profession. I highly recommend those guides. They're not best practices. They're a guide to how you can approach doing the work, and you then define your own best practices. Acumen, which has a forensic and risk analysis tool, their annual summit is the end of September in Houston. At the AACE National Conference in Washington, D.C., we'll be there in booths 302 and 304. So if you're there, stop by and say hello. We're going to have a pretty good-sized team there this year. Questions? Dan? What kind of questions do you have?
All right. We had a few that were submitted. The first one was, could you walk through the steps of getting 2 schedules to appear on the screen simultaneously?
Sure. Let me just do a file close all. So the first thing that has to happen is the 2 projects have to be in the same database. So here I'm going to select my 11 update, my 12 update. So I just did a shift click to select both of them. Then I do a right click, open the project, and there they are. Okay?
The next question, which they replied actually back that you had answered it, but just to go over for everybody else, is how was the sort 1 column populated? Was this done manually, or is there a quick way to add the numbers?
Painfully. It's populated painfully. This is another reason not to have a lot of activities in the graphic. But what's nice about it is it's really instant. If I wanted to move something around for whatever reason.
The next question that was submitted is, why don't you use baselines, aka targets in P3, with color-coded bars to compare the schedules?
Because I don't have as much control over what I can see. Here I'm actually looking at two schedules, and I can see how they physically change. Using targets or baselines, as they call them in P6, is one of the ways that we used to do it, but here's a different approach to it using multiple schedules. One of the first people I saw do this was Craig Olson. There was a project that he was on that had a series of about 10 activities that kept moving around from update to update, and the contractors going, I don't know what you're talking about. So Craig went in and he did a filter that selected just these 10 activities and opened like 8 projects, the baseline and 8 projects at once. And you could look down the screen and see how this bunch of activities was over here, and they were over here, and they were over here, and it hadn't even started yet. And so it was a great way of communicating a problem to someone who just didn't think that there was a problem. You couldn't get away from it. And yes, you can do the same thing with baselines, but personally I find baselines to be kind of a pain in the butt. I'll save a project as a baseline, but I'll also make a copy of it so that I can use it right here. I mean, I don't have to organize by project. The interesting thing here is I can get rid of all my organization, and I've got the same activity multiple times. In fact, if I want to see how one activity is changing from one update to another, I can get a list of the same activity for as many times as I have projects open. So it offers some interesting capabilities for how we communicate with our clients. Next.
All right. What other softwares did you mention that could be used in lieu of Snagit?
There's a few out there that can be pretty useful. Adobe has Captivate, Microsoft has Visio, along with PowerPoint. These are things that we started doing back when you had Lotus Freelance. Some of you may actually remember that. There's a multitude of graphics programs out there that could be used. As far as screen capture, just Google screen capture. There's a bunch of them. In fact, when I did that, one of the magazines has a list of the top 5 screen captures. I've used Snagit for years. It's not expensive, and I think I bought copies for all of our schedulers to do reviews and have to do this kind of thing for clients. So we use it throughout the company.
Don, there's one other one that is a free tool that you can get, which is it's called Snipping Tool.
Yes, it's built into Microsoft Office. And if I didn't have Snagit, I might use the snipping tool. But Snagit also works for other things, because with Snagit, I can blur parts of the image. There's a lot of other graphic management tools within Snagit. But you're right. The Microsoft snipping tool would work as well.
The next couple questions that were asked were regards to the presentation, if it will be available. Yes, we are going to be sending out an email to all registrants and attendees today that will include a recording of today's webinar that you could watch again at your leisure. We'll also include a copy of all the questions asked along with the answers that we are giving you, and a copy of today's presentation in PDF format. The next question that was asked is, can I add a third schedule into your timeline?
Yeah. Like the example I gave to Craig Olson had done, he had like 8 schedules open at the same time. really no limit.
Let's see. There was a question about, can you tell us a little bit about the new 8.3, the discussion tab under activity detail view?
No. It works with team member, so you pretty much need to have EPPM deployed to make use of it. To me, it's not all that different from feedback. It's a different medium, if you will, of storing comments and discussions on activities, but it does require EPPM to be deployed, and not everyone has that available. Jonathan is going to be doing the webinar in May on new features in 8.3, and he will be covering that.
All right. Somebody asked, why are you not using Claim Digger? Is it working?
Well, Claim Digger in T6 gives me a tabular report of the differences between two schedules. What I'm doing with this progress diagram is giving a client a graphic comparison that they might find easier to read than a 35-page Claim Digger report. Okay? So it's all about communicating more clearly with the client. I'm not a huge fan of the Claim Digger in T6. It doesn't, it gives me a lot of information, too much information usually. I'll use it to check and verify things, but or I'll copy and paste maybe pieces of it into a report just to say give a list of activities that happened, that were added or deleted. It makes that part of the job easier. Claim Digger is used along with Acumen Fuse and Ron Winter's tools when we're doing schedule reviews, and information is included in the report. This particular webinar was focused on just the progress analysis graphic, which is just one piece, of a monthly schedule review report.
The next question, actually the next two questions are very similar. The first one is, how do you create this sort and filter fields? And then somebody asked, in my project, the user-defined fields that you used are not there. Do you need to add them manually?
Yes, they do have to be added. And you need to go to the Enterprise menu, user-defined fields, and add them. Now, depending on the environment that you're in, you may not have the rights to add them. I don't think that they can be turned off, that you can't see them. But if there's nothing there, then you would have to add them. And you can create user-defined fields on activities, projects, resources, WBS. So there's a lot of capability for user-defined fields, and they can be cost. They can be like milestones with a finish or start date. Indicators I find to be very handy, especially if I'm in a layout I'm trying to show where someone has added or deleted some activities. It really it draws a person's eye to that, and then you can explain it better.
All right, and the last question that was asked is, activity 12-190 has 2 bars on one line, and they want to know how you did that.
12-190 has 2 bars on one line. So we're probably talking about right here. There's 2 bars in one line. Well, this is a great time to talk about the impact of out-of-sequence progress, because what happened here, if you look up here, the predecessor to 12190 is a finish to start relationship with this temporary water type. And if I come down here, you can see the temporary water type has not started, even though that relationship is still there. This is called out of sequence progress. The hang drywall started before this activity finished, and so when you use retained logic as your basis of calculation, this finish to start relationship will continue to drive that activity. That little arrow that you see on my screen right there, that is the logic that's driving the remaining duration of hang drywall. So it is one activity, but its timeline is interrupted by the relationship of its predecessor driving it out away from the data date. Okay, it's caused by the retained logic calculation.
That is all the questions that we had submitted, Don.
All right, I hope you found this useful. We're always open for suggestions on other things that we can do. If you're not getting our newsletter, you can go to the website and sign up for it. And you can also access all the past webinars, all the tech memos, and you can put in a suggestion of a tech memo that you might find useful. So thank you, everybody, for showing up, and we'll see you next month when we talk about the new features in P6 8.3. Thank you.